faces are not going to save us. Just look at the Black proponents of Cop City in Atlanta's leadership class. Just look at the Black woman's hand ambassador at the UN voting against a ceasefire in Gaza. That is, our Blackness and our womanness are not in themselves trustworthy. If we allow ourselves to be conscripted into positions of power that maintain the oppressive status quo, if we support the occupation of Black neighborhoods with so-called better trained police, or remain silent about the genocide of oppressed peoples around the world funded by our tax dollars.
And I'm just gonna stop it there because it's longer, but I think those are the most important parts.
Yeah. 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 I feel like this came up for me on Instagram a little while ago. Impossible to say how long ago because, you know, time. But I think she speaks really high, like straight to the matter on a lot of it.
Yeah, I think, you know, when I hear this quote, what comes to mind for me is that one of the ways that the systems that are dominating and oppressing and subjugating us remain intact is that it's so easy for us to forget that it's not the individuals, it's the systems. You know, it's like, if the system is in place, individuals have to behave a certain way, right? To become a part of these systems, to be promoted within these systems, right? To get access and opportunity. And then we lose sight of what we really need to be challenging when we focus our energy and attention on individuals who exist within the system, right? And who did what they needed to do or had to do to gain a certain degree of, you know, power within these structures. And the system remains intact, yet we're attacking each other.
Yeah.
So when she said Black faces in high places, right? Or our Blackness and our womanness in and of themselves are not trustworthy, it reminded me to, like, let's remember where the problem lies. Let's get to the origin. Let's get to the root cause of what we're dealing with here. Because for me, that makes things a lot more simple when we're thinking about how we make decisions moving forward. This isn't really about Kamala, so to speak, right? That's a distraction. I mean, to a degree, we are looking at something that does feel very historic as a Black woman has an opportunity to become a president. But again, a president within a system.
A lot to say about this. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that for me is just kind of like, sometimes, I don't want to say frustrated, but I'm so confused at times when I hear people who seem to be for liberation, you know, anti-oppressive,
be bending over backwards for Kamala.
Yeah. It's like, wait a minute. Did we just forget that?
I was like, no. The fuck is going on? It's like, wait a minute. Wait a goddamn it. Or like when they sent for Obama, right? Like, it's a similar kind of like, whoa. Wait a minute. You do see that the call is coming from inside the house. I couldn't have said it better. That's exactly what it is. The call is coming from inside the house. We are in the house. The call is coming from here. Yeah.
The house has not changed location.
Like, girl, look around. Look around. Yeah.
Like, all of it is still the same.
It's the same.
The only thing that changed is the person that walked in.
Thank you. Like, so I feel like I'm with you, Avi. I feel like a lot of what I think about is I read this book called Liberalism and Its Discontents that talks about identity politics as like a bastardization of liberalism, because identity politics is like, we see identity markers and then assume politics, which not only allows us to get caught into this like feedback loop of like, a Black woman is doing this, Yay! And then like the fact that Black women, like we already have the savior complex. And so people are like counting on us to like save their asses anyway. And then we kind of forget to notice that
Superwoman syndrome. Yep.
right, Superwoman syndrome. And then we forget to notice that the call is coming from inside the house, right? Like Kamala's a cop.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
We lose sight.
And we lose sight, right? And it's like we lose sight. Yeah. And it's like it's important to realize that like one of the reasons that we've noticed these systems like this and that we feel these systems are like this is that we exist in these systems. Like
right.
Here we are. And I think like I feel like the really quick slide from the Obama presidency in 2009 to the the Harris campaign in 2024 is like a very slippery slide, right? Because folks were like running in the streets and like, you know, jumping and like super excited that a Black dude became president. And yet we also forget that he was like the president of the silent drone strikes. And so I feel like we really have to be careful about what we want to be.
I agree.
You know, like,
yeah,
like,
for sure.
Like president sounds cool if you're also about like empire. And I am not about empire.
Right.
And so
they
like
cancel
this is
each
not
other out.
And they cancel, yes. And it's like I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be good. I want to be a bad guy in the system.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And that's just what it is. And when it comes down to it, it's like, wait a minute. Are we aiming to get to the top of an oppressive structure? Or are we aiming to dismantle
these structures?
Like, which one are we doing?
Yeah.
And we can't change. Like, that can't be a thing that when it's convenient for us that we're all on board with. But then when we have to make these tough decisions, we lose sight of and we forget. And I think part of why it is like just to be, you know, more, I guess, I don't want to say fair, but like if we're looking at the totality of the situation, it is nuanced in the sense that we're saying that something like identity politics matter, right? Representation matters. That is actually true.
Right? That is where I draw the line. I would say that representation and identity politics are not the same thing.
No, they're not. But what I'm saying is the reason why this is so challenging for us, I think oftentimes to remember and why we lose sight is because we want, right, to believe and to understand that because you are Black and you are a woman, that you understand like the experience. And like, I'm not going to sit here and say that Kamala doesn't understand the experience, but I don't think that that's relevant when we understand the bigger picture of the systems and structures. And I think where we get lost, and it is in some ways like challenging to really just look at and zoom in on one part of it, is because it does mean in some ways progress, even if it's not the progress that we want, even if it's not in the ways that it needs to be like fully, it still shows in some ways there's something that's happening. There's a shift that's taking place in the way that we look at power structures that we weren't able to, that our ancestors weren't able to. So it's like to totally ignore that, I think is not fair either. And it's not really honest. But at the same time, we have to look at like the fullness of what we're dealing with and then go right back to like understanding the systems that exist. And then stop expecting, like, once we understand the systems that exist, then we don't have these, you know, irrational expectations. Like, I Kamala do what Kamala's gonna do
because that's what it is to do in the presidency.
Because that's how Kamala got to where Kamala
got. Thank you. Thank you.
Right? Like,
if you get somewhere lying, cheating, and stealing, and like dancing, then you will continue to succeed lying, cheating, stealing, and dancing.
And in that case, it's less important to me what your race or gender is. Like, it doesn't care.
What you said about her, like her, whether or not she understands the experience not being irrelevant, I think is the linchpin, right? Like that is the exact thing, because we see her, we know that she probably knows what we're talking about, but we also know that she rose through the ranks in the bad way.
Yeah. And I mean, like I can only imagine like
the kind of shit she had to go through to get there
now, even, you know what I mean? Not even just going through to get there, like being in the position now, right? I can only imagine what her and Ketanji, you know, have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Like, they understand oppression. I don't question whether they understand oppression, at all. And I mean, I can even go as far enough to say they probably have the best of intentions. Yet again, this is not personal. This is about understanding the systems that we exist within. And when we understand those systems, then we depersonalize it. And we understand how they work and how they function.
Right. And these folks are just cogs in the machine, because that's all this is like one machine, right?
That's it.
I was like having a talk with another teacher, and we were talking about like scaffolding lesson plans, right? And how like, and I was talking about how one of my favorite things about scaffolding is that you create the larger structure, the invisible structure, right? And a good scaffold is invincible. And then the students come, they press play, and then everything works the way you want it to, because you kind of planned it like that, right? And then the students come up to you later in the corner and they're like, oh, wow, I learned all of these things.
Yeah, like that's such a good
the way that this happened was so wild.
That is so good.
Wow. So I say all of these to say that this is how the system is working.
Yes.
Right? Like there is like this large invisible machine that's happening just out of eyesight. And these folks are getting in these positions and doing this thing because that is what the system deigns them to do.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think you mention, and I think also can we title this episode something around like the call is coming from inside the house?
Let's do it.
Because I really feel like that's like the metaphor that we're just going to be rolling with. And I feel like it's the same thing about kind of like police brutality. I think like any real critique of the government is like, this is how, like the fact that, you know, the carceral system falls heavily on like Black and brown people rather than white people. Like, this is how it was designed to function.
That's right.
Like getting mixed up in the kind of like individual politics of this one person doing this one thing in this one position of power gives us a tunnel vision in a way that we don't see that they're so much bigger, right? They're so much larger.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's the same thing, I think, even when we think about it in the reverse sense of like the exceptional Negro, right? Like when a Black person does something amazing, it's because they're exceptional.
They're exceptional.
Because they're Black, right?
Right.
When
they get recognized for it, it's because they're Black.
Right, exactly. So I think it works both ways. But you know, what I really want to like talk about is the way that voting is coming to the surface now, more as like, you know, a conversation in terms of like, what has voting ever really done for us as a people, like as a collective? That's something that is circulating, and there's a group of people who are, you know, like anti-vote. They do not believe that voting has ever actually helped us to progress in the ways that we needed to. And then there's the other side of it, in the argument of like how our ancestors fought so hard for the right to vote, because it is the tool, right, that we've been given within the system, right, to exercise the agency that we do have. So then people are like, well, if you don't vote, you know, and if you don't start at the local level, then, you know, you don't have a right to complain. And this conversation, I think I think it's nuanced. I don't think it's super straightforward. I think that I'm somebody who like have had such mixed feelings about voting for quite some time. And I go back and forth, and I have gone back and forth, because in some ways I think that change is possible. But in other ways, I truly understand that this system is never going to serve us, at least not in our lifetimes. In a way that is going to, like, things can happen overnight. We saw that during COVID. We've seen that so many times. When they want to, when it is good for them. That's right. So when we say change is slow, it's happening, but it's slow.
It's propaganda.
It's propaganda. It's not happening because they don't want it to happen.
Because they don't want it to.
Because those who are benefiting from the privilege are going to be disadvantaged in some way.
Absolutely. And they want to convince you that it takes a long time that you sit on some of your more effective tools.
That's right.
Let's just put it that way. Yeah. In lieu of like doing the system. I also really kind of want to hit on this argument that you made about it wasn't your argument. It was like what people say about like our ancestors.
Yes.
You know, they knew that voting was the thing. So like, we got to do it. And it's like, the logic here is not tracking for me. It's not hitting for me, because as systems become more complex, we figure out more and more of it. For our ancestors, it's absolutely true that they thought that voting was going to be the way out, right? Yeah. But I think here we are, 100 years later, several hundred years later in some cases, noticing some things, right? And what we've seen is Reconstruction go up and down. What we also saw was Jim Crow. What we also saw was the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act get passed and then gutted within 10 years. So what? So what? Right? I also feel like the whole, like, if we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results, like, that's the definition of insanity.
Yeah, right.
So like, while I do think that voting, so like, while I think that voting was a tool of the past, was a helpful tool of the past, and was a way inside, it cannot be, as we've seen historically, cannot be the way inside.
It's not.
Right. And then, like, also, sorry, last thing.
No,
and it's
ahead.
like, also, this is what, oh my God, there's a Black feminist in my sphere right now that is slapping me about this, but like, the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. And I feel like this is a perfect example of it. And I feel like that quote, I think it's bell hooks, but I think that quote has haunted me my whole life, because I was like, what do you mean? If the master's tools built it, like, they can totally take it down. And then trying to think about what that means metaphorically. And I think, like, this is it, right? Voting is a tool that this system has used in order to tell you that they have an input, when clearly the only thing that makes sense is that there's a few people figuring it out, making you feel like you have an illusion of choice. It's like Coke and Pepsi.
Yes, right. Because they change the rules whenever.
Because they change the rules whenever
right.
It's convenient.
We've seen that happen with the Electoral College.
Oh, with COVID.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just like you said, when it comes to insanity and doing the same thing over and over and over again. I also think about, like, likening this to an abusive relationship, because I feel like we're in a cycle of abuse in an abusive relationship with the government, right?
And okay, so to this point, I have a very good friend who is ex cult. And they got out of their cult like 7 years ago. There's no need to identify the cult, because it's like you can throw a stone and find a cult, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But anyway, so like, they got out of their cult like a little less than 10 years ago. And one of the things that they've been talking about is how disappointing it is that the logic inside the cult also works outside of the cult, because like, we're just locked in series of abusive relationships with systems of power.
Basically. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, if it's not God being the imaginary abusive force, it's like the government. Right. And then at the same way, there's still a few white dudes at the top making rules.
That's right. That's right. And I feel like if we don't recognize, like, our actual power, right, like, and really truly understand where our power lies, which is in community, right?
It's together.
Always, always collectively in community, together, and dismantling, not trying to climb up, but trying to dismantle, right? These systems, that is where our power lies. Unfortunately, we continue to give it up regularly because we don't really understand our power. You know, there's way more of us than there are those people who are making decisions. They literally have no power without us.
Yes. And if we decided that we weren't going to machine anymore,
exactly,
in whatever way that meant, and we saw this with like the Montgomery boycott, right? The only thing that really matters is to hit them in their pockets, especially since that's the only thing that they're listening to. So it's like, if you speak in a language that they can't deny, which is cash, right? If we all decided to stop working and just do community co-op the entire way around. And like, in any way, shape, form, or fashion, then I think that's the only thing that would get anything to happen. Right. And I think you're totally right. Like, it just reminds me of a bunch of ants and seeing like 20 or 30 ants carry off like a big piece of fruit. Right. And it's like, that can be us, but you playing.
This could be us. We need a meme.
This could be us, but you playing.
You know what? And also, I don't know if you've heard about the recent shift in consumer spending, but how all of the prices are starting to lower post-COVID, because people are just like, we're not doing this anymore.
We're not doing it.
Like, fine, you want to continue to hike up your prices? I will not be spending.
I won't do it.
right? And so now they're actually being forced to lower their prices to bring customers back. Again, when you hit them where it hurts, that's when things change.
And then we're all just reminded how
Mhm.
imaginary the whole thing is anyway.
Exactly. It's all an
You
illusion.
know, it's all an illusion.
illusion
Like
of
they
control.
decided to bring their prices down. They didn't they didn't have to raise them in the first place.
Never had to.
They did
Never
it.
had
They
to.
did it for a key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right?
Yeah.
To continue to make sure that those who are the haves continue to have, right? And those who are doing the work at the bottom will continue to not get anything. It never trickles down, right?
No. Trickle down economics was a lie started by Reagan, and we all know what that was for.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I challenge everyone to think about, like, you know, on some level, right? On some like micro level, this is happening in your everyday life in some way.
I don't even know if it's a micro level. It's just like on a level, it's happening. You just got to tap into it.
I agree.
It,
I agree. Because I think big picture, we all know what's happening like in the collective, like macro. But I also think it's happening like in our day-to-day, in our interactions with like our coworkers at work, in our relationships. Like we are not recognizing our power. We're not understanding like which aspects of how we operate absolutely need to be dismantled. And I think when we start to do that, it seems like most things start with the individual first, right? And I think that's part of the issue is like we continue, another part of us like outsourcing our power is not recognizing that we can't continue to point either. Like we absolutely have to start with ourselves.
Yeah.
And really like face the difficult truths of like how not voting feels very uncomfortable because we're afraid, right? And the fear mongering and the lesser of two evils continues to be held over our heads. And it's just, if we really sit and think about it, when is that ever not the narrative when we're voting? That's pretty much always the narrative, right? We are not voting in our best interest. We're literally voting to keep someone else out of office. Yeah. And it just continues to keep us in the same exact position.
Yeah.
Term after term.
Yeah. And I feel like the thing that I've been feeling that I've had a hard time articulating is like, it's both how like bored I feel with the like apocalyptic feeling of like how this feels like 2016 or 2020, right? And like how the stakes keep getting upped and I'm just tired, you know? Like, I'm like, it's just like, you have made us all hostage in this system. And then it's like, you look at Democrats, you look at Republicans, one of them has better rhetoric, but that's about it.
Yep. Pretty
much. Know, and it's like, and it's like, what are we doing? And what are we afraid of, really? And what are we afraid of that's not already happening?
That part. And that's what
like,
I mean.
That's my real question. What are we afraid of that's not already happening?
It's already happening.
And yeah, and it's like there was this documentary on Amazon called like God and Country that's kind of about the rise of Christo-fascism.
Yeah.
And I thought one of the interesting things about it was that there were a lot of white folks who were interviewed who were like, you know, various experts and things. And when they were asked, you know, could you have seen this coming? They were like, oh, no. I could have never thought that this was happening. Like on January 7th or whatever that infamous day was, that other infamous day was in history. They were like, I could have never seen it coming. And then there was one Black lady who was an expert on a thing, and they asked her, and she was like,
really?
From a mile away. Like, she's like, yes, I knew this. Like
we
you
knew
could
it
see
was
it coming.
Come on.
And now. So I think that's the other thing. And this, I think, shifts to a part of the perspective. And this is a part of why we want identity politics to work. And also a part of like how a lot of us feel in community with each other, right? Is that like in Black and brown communities, we see a lot of this apocalyptic shit happening every day, right? Like it just is what it is to be in our communities, to be in our bodies. We're living it, right? And we've been living it. For generations, we've been living it.
But
right?
I think there's also like we talked about a willful ignorance. We talked about that. I think there's like a general disconnect for us, like really understanding, especially for those of us who haven't had the chance to really like explore the world or know what it's like to be in other countries. There's like, we are literally dealing with
it doesn't have to be like this
much. You know what I mean? Like even just in marketing, like the ways that we are being like exploited
Yeah.
the ways we're being bombarded with so many
Yeah.
messages on a regular day, every day.
Yeah.
The level of scam activity that's happening everywhere, like all of these like workplace tutorials of how to like identify a scam, like this is not normal, y'all. Like, and it's like we've become so desensitized to how abnormal this is that we're really not even conscious and aware of like the very thing we're running away from is already upon us. We live in an environment that never feels safe.
Girl.
Everywhere you turn, you got to make sure that everything is, you know what I mean, guarded.
People are literally encouraging you to like, people are encouraging you to carry a gun because, you know, it's not safe. And I'm like, are guns going to make us more safe? And but you're right. Like these, it's like we're in an abusive relationship.
Absolutely.
Where all of these things feel so normal that we've just forgot to look at them, right? And it's like we should be able to feel safe in our communities, and if we don't feel safe in our communities, that has very little to do with us.
That almost sounds foreign.
Yeah, right. To be safe in your community, to be in somewhere where you don't feel the need to lock your door.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially for those who are most, you know, pushed to the margins, right?
Yeah. Right. To like walk around a place with like, and also I'm saying this out loud and it feels so like low stakes, right? To like be somebody in any kind of body walking around with like noise canceling headphones, right? Like it's to just take a walk and like listen to your music is just, you can't even do that, right? Like, and then not only that, but it's like, you're worried about the police. You're worried about getting exploited at work. You're worried about dying on the job, right? Like you're worrying, like there is so
much to worry about, right?
There's so much to worry about.
The fear mongering never stops.
Right. And I think that is also another tool that they use to control us.
Absolutely. But I want to read this excerpt really, really short from Letters of Gratitude by Leon Benson. And it was the foreword of his book that was written by a professor, I believe. His name is Derek Ford. Okay, it says, the state is a relatively recent phenomenon in human history, and it serves as a mechanism to protect the oppressing class and enforce its will over society. It does so through repressive and productive means. It represses with cops and courts, prisons and militaries, but it produces through media and schools, cultural norms, and routine habits. Prisons function to contain the power of the people. There would be no need for a state if it weren't for the infinite intellectual and creative capacity of the 99% and the clear threat they pose to the completely illogical and irrational society in which we live.
Boom.
So back to this part about understanding the role, right? And how the systems and the structures are designed within our society to help us forget, right? That our power lies within the 99%. We literally outnumber. Nothing can function without our complicity, unfortunately, right? Whether we understand that or not, I think coming to that level of awareness to understand that, like, it's literally just a carrot. What do they call that?
The carrot on the stick.
Yes, it's the carrot on the stick. You're never, ever going to attain it.
No.
It's literally just out of reach enough for you to see it, think it's possible, right?
And strive for it.
But you're never going to actually attain it because that's never been the goal.
Right. And it's like the other thing is like, for me, this metaphor extends downward and that like we're on a treadmill and the treadmill is powering this machine.
Oof,
right.
Yes.
And it's like the more, and it's like literally the treadmill is the thing that is powering this thing. And the fact that we're all running on this bitch like a bunch of rats is what is, you know, causing this thing. And it's like the moment that we think about slowing down, even, right? The moment that we realize that the carrot is not
attainable.
It's not attainable, right? The realization that we can find our own carrots elsewhere. Right.
That part. We can grow our own carrots.
We can literally grow our own carrots.
I mean,
I kind of also want to go back to like the idea of community and like, you know, like working on like it starts with yourself and your friends, right?
Yeah.
Like I've been hanging out with a lot of my queer and trans friends, and everyone has been picking up a what I've been calling a end of empire activity, right?
Mm.
In which like we have all kind of regressed to picking up habits from like the 1800s, right? As a way of like helping build ourselves up for when the empire falls, right? So like I'm brewing kombucha. My friend is making shrubs and like pickling bits of vegetables that otherwise he would like throw away, right? And like everyone's getting into canning and like these kinds of things as a way of like building ourselves up. So I think I bring this up as a way of saying that we as humans have infinite creative capacity to do literally whatever we want.
That's right.
And that if we don't want to do this thing, we literally don't have to do this thing, and we can put our efforts towards anything else.
That's right. That's right. Oh, that is so true. And you know, and I picked up that quote too because it brings it back to policing, which is like one of the other, right, like structures within the system at large. That is and you know, part of the state, and that allows the state to continue to function in the way that it does.
The sword of the state.
And then we continue to, you know, have this love-hate relationship with policing. You know, I think as a community, within the Black community, where, you know, there are people who want to be a part of the discussion about, you know, police, you know, are just doing their jobs, or we actually need police in some way. There's so many of us who still can't imagine a world outside of like the way that we currently police, because we fear each other.
We fear each other.
The deficit narratives exist within our communities. Like white supremacy exists very much so within all Black spaces.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's right. And so like, it's really important for us to like acknowledge that. And so when we think about like what's happening with Sonia Massey, it just, you know, it's, as somebody who works in the mental health field, as a mental health practitioner, you know, and working with the population of individuals who, you know, do struggle with aspects of their mental health, to see the kind of way that fear like penetrated that community, you know what I mean, was really disgusting to me. You know, these are individuals who need to be the most protected, you know, who are the most vulnerable. Our disabled communities need to be protected the most, yet they are the most vulnerable to acts like this, right? And they're constantly being carried out and not talked about enough.
And I think there's so much about mental health stigma too, in which people don't really understand what it is, and so they fear it, right? And like, and also want these people to be the most policed when they are also like at the brunt of both the police and state historically. Right. Yeah. And it's like I feel like this community gets so much heat for not being understood, and then when you get to understand what the thing is, the case of Sonia Massey gets worse.
Yeah. And so and think about like voting. Are we voting to continue to allow individuals to be in spaces that are making decisions who have like zero to no lived experience in like the disabled community and
thank you,
like who sits in a decision-making position now that is a representative of the disabled
this community?
Who?
Right. And it's like when we were talking to Leon,
right?
Yeah. And it's like when we were talking to Leon, and it was like the same thing, right? Of like, he's the person with the prison experience who can actually talk about what it's like to be in prison, rather than a whole bunch of people who haven't been in prison, who haven't been around prison, who don't even know people who've been in prison, talking about prison.
Yes. And when we continue to just allow people, right, to
talk out of their asses.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Talk out of both sides of their faces. We are giving away that as an actual demand that we should have to support our communities. Otherwise, we need to go ahead and stop with the protesting. Stop with the consistent, you know, social media sharing, because you're not going to actually use
you don't actually know what it is you're fighting for.
You don't.
Right?
You don't. I mean, it's literally crazy to constantly be in a position where it's just another face, different name, different day, same situation. And then it's like, enough is enough.
Right. And I think enough. Right. And I think this is what about I did not mean to go there, but here we are. But like, this is also what kind of irritates me about the dialogue about Trump being a criminal and
Mm.
Trump being a felon.
Yeah, please expound.
About like it bothers me because I feel like we need ex-felons to talk about their experience
Yes,
in
yes.
the prison industrial complex, you know? Like if the prison industrial complex wasn't the prison industrial complex that like re-traumatized people who were already traumatized,
Right.
then then it becomes a conversation about like why are we shaming people for past wrongs, right? But I think this whole conversation with Trump is like, yes, he is a criminal, but he is a criminal, right? He like has a felony charge, but like the reason that we hate him is not that he has a felony charge.
Right.
The reason that we hate him is because he absolutely bulldozes people for his own agenda. They said it's because he doesn't care about people. It's because he does whatever he wants. The court just happened to give a ruling
That's right.
that said that he did that, even
That's
though
right.
we know that courts determine what's legal, not what's morally correct.
Exactly. Right. Because then what it requires us to do is to start to ask ourselves how we've been duped into adopting this definition of what a criminal is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what is an actual criminal? Does it actually exist?
Yeah. And how do you know that? And when you think about a criminal, who do you think about? Right. And then let's dissect that image for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, if nothing else, what this should do is open up that conversation. Right?
Yeah.
And again, another thing we need to be demanding from anybody who is trying to get our vote as a president is that all of the people who we know personally, anybody in our family, and just hell, because it can happen to any one of us, we can be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Especially when we look the way we do, right?
Yes, thank you.
That we have to start asking for individuals to be given the opportunity to live their lives, get their lives back. It is so that what is done to them once they have done their time, even, and how they're branded almost for life.
Literally.
You know what I mean? It's just
absolutely
literally, yeah. So we can talk,
and it's like
Jim Crow and
yeah, absolutely. And it's like I want to be able to have a governing body that exists of people who have been in prison, that exists, that consists of sex workers, right?
Yes.
Consists of disabled people, that exists of people who have existed on the outside of margins, because those are the people who understand how society works.
Oh, right.
Because they are the fuel that goes into the machine that keeps it running, and the machine runs on blood.
So, you know, as we conclude, you know, this conversation, which I think has been really helpful in doing exactly what I wanted it to do, like just kind of like process everything that's happening.
Yeah.
And like the way I am choosing, or what this has done for me, is it has really forced me to sit with, like, what are the principles? Like, how can I sit down and ask myself, what are the guiding principles that I want to really govern my actions? Because I think when I do that, it's a lot easier for me to not only right now make the decision that I believe is right, but in general, just moving forward with all of the things that are constantly being presented to keep us distracted, to keep us from recognizing our power. It's like, what are my guiding principles? When I think about that, those lie in understanding the importance of the collective, of community, of shared liberation, right? It becomes very easy for me to make the decision. And bringing it back to the conversation about voting and how people believe that our ancestors, you know, did all these things so that we could vote, and we're throwing it away. It's like, it's not the literal translation of continuing to vote in a system that we realize has not serving us.
Our ancestors,
the equivalent of using the tools we have at the moment to make sure that we are fighting for liberation.
Thank you.
The vote in and of itself.
Our ancestors wanted us to be free.
That's right. That's right. Not to continue to vote.
Not to continue to vote. If voting is not giving us our freedom, then what are we fucking doing?
No, do you think that they would be doing the same things today in 2024 when they realize it does not work? Absolutely not. Our ancestors innovative, right?
Right. Our ancestors braided trails to freedom in their hair.
Woo.
We have everything we need.
Everything.
We just have to access it. And I think that's the other thing. Like, there's this quote about revolution in which we all don't have the same job in the revolution.
Yeah.
We all have different lanes.
Yeah.
Our job now is to figure out where your lane is and to get there.
I love that. I love
right?
that.
And to get there, and then not only once you get there, to talk to everybody else who's in the same lane as you, and make sure they know what lane you're in and what exactly you're doing.
That's right. That's right.
You know, and so I think that's, yeah.
And I just say, no matter, you know, what your choice ends up being, you know, because we all have a decision to make, that you don't stop there.
No,
like, right?
Voting
like,
is not the end all be all.
I'm not going to vote, and I'm taking that stance, and like, that's admirable. And it also doesn't stop there, because not voting is like actually not doing anything. Like, what else are you like voting?
It doesn't do anything.
What else? And if you are choosing to vote, right, for Kamala Harris, like, what else are you going to do?
What else are you going to do?
Again, you can't stop there.
And also, under the what else are you going to do, I do not want to hear you say lobby for Kamala Harris.
Oh, right.
That's not what I don't. I also don't want to hear you say give money to Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
that's not what we're asking. Yeah. We're asking, off the beaten path, what are you doing to fight for our collective liberty?
And that just makes me think about, what was it, the Zoom call that was like white women for Kamala Harris, or white men for Kamala Harris? You know,
I'm sorry,
like, you know,
it's a big no for me.
The things that y'all can do when y'all want to, it's
when
really
y'all want to.
But also, I want you to keep that same energy, because I want you all to remember, when you're encountering that Black woman at work, right? When you're encountering that queer person at work, right? Are you also carrying that same energy into your everyday interactions? I think it was Leon Benson that said, the activism is in your everyday life.
Yeah.
It can't just be the Zoom call activist.
It's in your everyday interaction.
It's in how you show up in every
how you show up
that you're having with people. So it's like, we don't really need that, right? That is not doing anything for the collective. We need you to make decisions every single day that are in the best interest of our liberation.
Right. And every single day. And not to end this kind of like a white person would, but at least I'm not misquoting MLK, but like MLK said, like, be the change you want to be, want to see in the world. Yes. And we mean that. We don't mean like, and it's like, if people call you a Karen behind your back, you're not doing the work, you know?
Right. And for the record, you have to kind of earn your way out of that, because Karen is the default setting.
You actually have to earn yourself. Yes.
It's just automatic, right?
And
you
like every
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I don't know about you, but every time.
When was the last time you gave a white woman the benefit of the doubt?
Every single time. It never fails. It never fails. And I know it's possible. And I see some people waking up. Absolutely. But it doesn't exist in those bandwagon moments. It definitely does not. It exists in the every single day. And so that's just, I think, what we can leave, you know, as food for thought is, don't stop there.
Right.
And TJ, you had an amazing analogy about knowing your lane, and your role, and talking to those within your lane.
Our food for thought from today's episode is really going to be one of the things that we left you with, which is that activism starts in your everyday life. We encourage you to think about what your lane is, what your job is in the coming times, to find your lane, to get to your lane, to talk to the people in your lane, and to create change from within.